And so it's 7:01. So why don't I at least introduce myself and then I can turn it over to the counselor. So my name is Rena Stimson. I'm the Dean of Students at Derryfield. So welcome. I'm also was a DS parent. I guess always a DS parent, right? When your kids go to Derryfield, and my kids are young adults. One of my children now works at Derryfield with Courtney Cheatham in the basketball program. She's a coach, so it's always exciting. And so what we're going to do is I am going to at least turn it over to the counselors, but I wanted to do a couple housekeeping things. So, Courtney and Mary are going to present some information for us to digest, to think about. And, we also want to hear from you. This isn't sort of like a Zoom meeting platform. This is more of a presentational platform. However, we do have a chat feature we're going to use when we have some scenarios, which are very relevant scenarios about parenting and stress and what might make our stress levels go up as parents. So we're going to use the chat feature for the interactive part, and then the Q&A we're going to reserve for your questions for Courtney and Mary to take later on. We're going to definitely have time for Q&A at the end of the session. So as you're thinking about things, either write them down on a piece of paper or just use a chat, and we'll wait and we'll go that. Well, I'm sorry, Q&A for Q&A, and the chat is going to be for our interactive scenarios. So let us start. So that's enough about me and my situation, but let's turn it over to Mary Perkins and Courtney Cheatham, who are our two counselors at Derryfield. So go right ahead, introduce yourselves, give us a little information about you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Raina. And thank you, Raina, for being here tonight. Raina is a busy lady, so we're very happy to have her here on our panel. She's a wealth of information and experience, so thanks. My name is Mary Perkins, and this is my 20th year as a counselor at Derryfield. And like all of you, I'm also a Derryfield parent. So one of my daughters, started in 6th grade and went all the way through, and she graduated in 2017. And my son, who also started in 6th grade, is a 10th grader this year. So I have to say that parenting kids through middle and high school has probably been like one of the most important, like most helpful things for me in terms of my work and understanding the parent perspective. So you can know everything there is to know about adolescent development, and you can work with teenagers for a long time, but nothing can prepare you for the feeling of watching your child struggle. So it's been helpful for me to be a parent in my work. So I'm excited because a lot of the things we're going to talk about tonight, I can relate to personally. So that's exciting. This year I've been working virtually a lot. One of my kids is medically fragile, so I've been being very careful this year, but I've been blessed to have Courtney Cheatham join me this year because she is like amazing and our kids absolutely love her. So I'm going to let Courtney introduce herself now.
Awesome.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Courtney. Thanks, Mary.
You're welcome.
I'm the lucky one because by coming to Derryfield, I get to work with you guys all the time. So my name's Courtney. This is my first year at Derryfield, but I've been in education now. I think this is my 16th year, believe it or not. You can't really see my grades, but there's some up there. Yes. Anyways, so I help co-parent 3 kids, 2 teenagers and one's a little younger. I also have 3 poodle mixes and 2 furry bunnies that I'm actually trying to rehome. So if anyone's in the market, it's just a little pitch there, a little side pitch.
She lives on a farm. Courtney lives on a farm.
Yeah, in the middle of Manchester. I don't know how that works. And so, previously I've taught actually math, and I've run a STEM program, and I actually worked on some social emotional learning curriculum in different schools. And most recently I was a mental health clinician actually at Southern New Hampshire University. And then I was working at the Londonderry School District, and I reworked and wrote a bunch of social emotional learning curriculum for them. So although I've dabbled in the math world a little bit, my training is as a mental health clinician. And I also coach basketball. That's a side gig that I enjoy thoroughly. And I'm the new varsity basketball coach at Derryfield. So go Cougars.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the introductions. And and Mary have come up with a presentation, so we'll have visuals as well.
Yeah, do you
And
want
so
to share the
Courtney's gonna, yeah,
slideshow?
perfect.
So just to start out, we wanted to just tell you a little bit about the counselor's role at Derryfield. I know it's different at every school. So, for those of you who are new to Derryfield, or maybe if you haven't interacted with our office, we just wanted to tell you a little bit about what we do at DS. So at Derryfield, the counselor's role is really to support kids in the day-to-day challenges of normal adolescence. So, for example, some of the things we might talk to kids about are like, issues with friends. We talk about a lot of social stuff. We talk about, just general stress and workload, or maybe like talking to a teacher and helping kids to kind of talk through how they might do that. All kinds of, those kind of normal things that we expect kids to struggle with. And then when those challenges fall outside of the realm of what we would consider normal or expected, then we help families to find outside support for those things. So we can help family with referrals and things like that. We typically work closely with outside professionals because they can actually be really helpful to us in terms of helping us understand how can we best support kids at school. And also we can just support like the work that they're doing with kids. One of the great things about being a school counselor is that we see kids in all different settings. So we might meet with them one-on-one. They might come in with their friends. We can see them in class. We see them at lunch or at recess. We kind of see how they fit in to the whole social context. And that information is actually really helpful to outside professionals who are maybe only seeing kids in the one-on-one setting. It's helpful for them to hear from us, how is this child doing in the context of their peers? How are they interacting with their friends? So that relationship can be really helpful when kids are working with outside therapists and other professionals. We are also, of course, here to support parents. We always reach out to parents if we have concerns about a child, or if we think a child might need some outside support, we reach out. And we're also just here as a sounding board. So like if your child is going through something and you just want to talk it through or make sure things are okay, please reach out to us. Don't hesitate. We also, I find it so helpful to hear the parent perspective and to understand what might be going on in kids' lives outside of school is really helpful. So just don't hesitate to reach out to us at any time. So that's just a little bit about what we do as school counselors. And now Courtney is going to introduce some of the content for this evening. Courtney.
Thank you. So I'm a big nerd and I love the brain. Literally turned like 22 and the only thing I wanted for Christmas was a book about the brain that was just like dense with information. It was amazing. It is amazing. But I always think it's really important to reflect a little bit about the science behind kind of what we're talking about. So this is some information from a study for the Center for the Developing Child, which is like kind of in Harvard's education and science school. But so in the last 10 to 15 years, there's been a huge increase in research about children's brains. And it has to kind of do with a discovery that it seems like anxiety and depression and trauma was increasing. And so as a result, it sort of informed a shift in how we approach children and adolescents as counselors. And it also has informed a shift with how we might approach our partnership with parents. What the research has shown is that exposure to traumatic events and an overall perception of threat at a younger age is actually changing the architecture of the brain. It could actually impair one's ability to learn and interact socially. It might sound a little unsettling, right, to think about that our children's brains are changing. But the good news is that this research also supports the notion that these same neural pathways that are changing can be rebuilt in a healthy way, and that will long term mitigate these effects and instead form resilience, which makes me feel a little bit better. So we often think that when we're responding to our children's stress, that we're actually doing it in a way to sort of reduce their fear and aid their long-term growth. But sometimes we actually might be getting in the way. So I'm not sure about you guys, but as a parent, I often feel like I'm failing. If my kids are stressed, if they're feeling pain or sad or angry or annoyed or any emotion because they're teenagers and they feel all the things all the time, I feel like if they're feeling badly, that somehow I didn't protect them and therefore I failed. As a parent, I think we think our job is to protect our kids from pain. At least that's sort of how I feel. And we don't want to see them struggle. We just kind of want to take that away if they're feeling it. When in actuality, I think that might be the wrong job description. Perhaps it's not really our job to protect them from this pain, but rather maybe we need to sit with them when they're going through this struggle. And maybe we even steer them to struggle. And then we point out the struggle and we call out the struggle. And we just try to remind them, hey, like that's your struggle, but your courage is actually greater than your fear. And I think that's really the essential message that we want to make sure we're trying and giving our kids.
So
go ahead, Mary.
So what we've done is we have written some scenarios that are actually really common scenarios. And these are scenarios that tend to trigger our anxiety as a parent. And when our anxiety as a parent gets triggered, we all sort of have different. Lynn Lyons, who's an anxiety expert and also my mentor, she calls it content. You know, we all have different content that kind of pulls at us. Some of us get more concerned about grades, or some of us are really worried about how our kids are doing in sports. Some of us are more concerned about social stuff. So like we all have that content that's going to trigger our anxiety. And sometimes when our anxiety gets triggered, you know, our instinct, as Courtney was talking about, is to respond in ways that have unintended consequences of actually increasing our kids' anxiety. So then our anxiety kind of becomes and feeds their anxiety. So we wanted to talk through a couple of these really common scenarios. And as Raina said, you know, hopefully you guys can use the chat, but we're going to read these scenarios and then we're going to focus on these three questions. One is like, what is this bringing up for you as a parent? What are the feelings? And then where could you go wrong, or where maybe have you gone wrong? Like we've all been there, right? So maybe what are some things you've done in this situation that wasn't as helpful as you hoped it would be or thought it would be? And then what would be a way that we could approach it that could minimize our children's anxiety? Because of course, as Courtney said, like we all just want to help our kids not struggle so much. And we're all coming from that place of trying to help our kids. What we don't always realize is that the actions we take with that goal in mind don't always have that outcome. So the first scenario is a very common scenario and a sad scenario. It's a social one. Do you want to switch to that slide, Courtney?
Yep.
Your child comes home very upset emotionally about what is happening with her best friend. Of course, this could be his or her, because this definitely happens to boys too. She reports to you that her best friend is ditching her for the popular group. She reports that this popular group does not include her at recess or in their group chats. Her best friend is not texting her as much and doesn't wait for her when she gets into school like she used to. So your child kind of comes home, they're very upset, they're crying, and this is what she reports to you. So hoping that you guys can help us out in the chat by just writing really quick 1 or 2 words about what does this bring up in you as a parent? I know what it brings up in me because I've actually been through this with my kids, but what does this bring up for you guys? What feeling is this bringing up for you as a parent? Because that's kind of an important first step as parents, as for us to recognize when we're getting pulled in. When
Yeah, so if you can use that chat feature and just write it, we do this in our classes now that we're using, we have kids that are remote and kids that are in classrooms. So we have this hybrid format. And sometimes I just say, everyone chat, everyone write down right now in that scenario. And if you yourself have been in that scenario, try to remember how that feels as a kid, right? And what are the, if we're thinking from the parent side, what emotion, if you could put that in the chat right now, what's the emotion that this emotes for you as soon as you heard the scenario?
So right now we're having a slight issue. We need to enable the attendee chat. Is there a way we can enable the attendee chat?
How do you do, Raina, can you do that?
Oh, I will try to work it out. Give me a second.
Few options, hold on, no.
Or you could maybe use the Q&A instead, if I can't figure it out. Hold on 1 second, please.
I also have our text expert on the line here, so I'm hoping that we can get into that. So right now, just pay attention to how you're feeling. And if you're getting frustrated because you can't use technology, I get that.
I totally get that.
I allowed attendees to chat with panelists and attendees.
Nice. See?
All right. Oh, now we got so I can't see it.
The Q&A works. It's Miss Roberts is saying. Okay, so please type your answer in the queue. Oh, there we go. Nope, we got it in the chat to work. Oh, God love technology.
Screen share, Courtney. Where's your screen share?
I'm coming back. So I couldn't see the chat.
We're good.
Yes, absolutely.
We're good, guys.
Rita,
so we have
empathy. We are empathizing for our child in this moment for sure.
Protective is another one that's coming up.
Pain of being a 7th grade girl. Yes.
Yes.
Patty care. Here.
So
yes.
Pain.
Parent. Middle school was the worst. Why did I ever go back and work in one? I love working there. It's
probably because of empathy, right? Because of empathy, really.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're feeling sad as parents for our kids. We're feeling really empathetic for what they're going through. What, and again to the chat, where could you go wrong in this scenario? I know where I've personally gone wrong. I can share that in a minute. But where could you go wrong in this scenario? Overreact, yes, you could definitely overreact.
And just to refresh the scenario, remember this is a social scenario.
Yes, try to suggest how to fix it. Yeah.
It's a good one.
Really good one.
That's a good one. We talked about that when we were preparing for this.
Reliving my own experience.
Oh, that's a good one. Reliving your own experience is what someone just said.
Trying to get too involved. Yes. Reaching out to friends, parents. Yep. I'm
interesting.
Not gonna lie, I've done that one.
Yep. But haven't we all? Like, this is why this is so great. And I just wanted to say one other, reaching out to other people. So what I want to say about that last comment, which is so interesting, is, maybe because of COVID too, the situation of being in COVID, we're not able to connect as much as parents. And I remember feeling so much better as a parent when we were all able to watch basketball games and soccer games, and you're standing on the sidelines and you're getting to know other parents and the parents of your kids' friends.
Yeah.
And then you're learning from each other, like, oh, my son's having such a hard time with this, and this. And then the parent says, yeah, me too. And here's what I did. And, just kind of gleaning the wisdom from older, parents who have older kids, older than mine. Because your oldest is always, I was the oldest, right? I'm sure a lot of us here are older children, like the oldest children of the family. Like, going through it for the first time with your oldest child is your first time going through whatever that scenario is. And then, I had 2 other kids after my son. So it's like everyone's experience is different. I had a son and 2 daughters. So, my son going through something one way and then my daughter going through something completely different. And their reactions, you don't know how they're going to react, and what bothers one doesn't bother another. And I was just thinking about how much I learned and maybe as my style too, is talking to other people to kind of get their feedback, wisdom, what would you do? What have you done? And so, like, I love this idea of sharing because it's kind of like that we're on the sidelines, right now of a game, and you're saying, hey, my daughter's really sad about something, and in a way just to help one another as parents, because I guess what we're saying is that we can relate to each other. I
Hmm.
think we always want the best for our kids, quote unquote, the best, whatever that is, right? And we have a vision of how things might go or could go or should go. So in the way of the popularity question, I guess I was just going to say, we all want our kids to be, I think, feel like they belong. I think that's something that we just talked about today in a meeting that we had at Derryfield, is that feeling of belonging, that your child belongs. And of course they do at Derryfield, but nonetheless, they could feel in the moment like, oh, I don't belong in that group. Or my friend that used to greet me at the door or that used to have lunch with me now is eating over there with that group. And do I belong with that group? Are they going to accept me? And I love that we're saying, we want to fix it. We want to say, I know how you can make this right. Like
I was gonna
do X, Y,
say,
and
yeah,
Z.
I was gonna say somebody mentioned about, trying to suggest how to fix it. And I think for me, we all have that thing that we feel like experts in. Like some people
Hmm.
might feel like experts in calculus, or they're experts in
Good
uh,
point.
ice hockey. For me, I feel like an expert in middle school social drama. So like I could have a PhD in it. So for me, I always felt that unsolicited advice piece for me as a parent was
Mm,
my biggest, that was the thing I had to work on the most, because when my kids were in social challenges and changing friendships and things, like I felt like I know exactly how this is going to go. It's like watching a train wreck. So I felt very expertish, and like I wanted to give them a lot of advice. Why don't you do this? You should do that. And the problem with unsolicited advice is the unintended consequence can be that we're sending the message to our kids, you can't handle this. And I think
mm,
we don't mean to do that. What we mean to do is like, I know so much about this. Oh my gosh, let me tell you, I will fix this for you. But
mm,
again, the unintended consequences is sometimes that feels to the child like they don't think I can handle this. And it doesn't help to build that confidence. So, but I'm with you, whoever said that. I don't remember who it was, but about wanting to give them all the advice,
get
because
too
we
involved.
know how to
Yeah.
fix it. We know what they should do. Um,
And then
so
Another point to
the
that,
other, oh, go ahead, Courtney.
go ahead, Courtney.
I was just gonna say, Mary, and also, I mean, most kids, let's be honest, they're a little like, I mean, they're teenagers, right? So they're a little egocentric. So they really just
Mm,
kind of want to talk about themselves. And when we go back and we're like, hey, yeah, when I was in seventh grade, that happened to me. They don't want to hear that. They don't want to. They don't. They want you to just like listen to what they have to say, and just sort of validate how they're saying. And so we want to make sure that we're validating still and being empathic, but then we're not trying to like, no, oh, hey, here I am, experienced, 35 years older than you. And so I know exactly what you went through, and I know that it's going to be fine, because they don't feel fine. And so we have to
mm,
validate how they feel, and then we have to empower them to feel like they can do it. And so that's why we can't really just tell them what to do, because that doesn't give them agency, right?
yeah.
Do you want to move to the slide after the scenario,
Well,
Courtney?
well, I think we still just want to talk about a question for the Q&A. The last part would be, so how can we rethink our idea in our response for a stress less approach? So what is something we could do when our kid comes to us with this scenario, in this
Mm,
scenario, to
Sort of like,
actually
how can we
do
keep
those
our
things?
own anxiety in check and respond in a way that can help our kids feel confident?
good, good one,
Call
good
Mary.
one.
Yes, you can call us. Absolutely.
You can.
actually,
Because
I
love
have done
I
that.
love middle school social drama and upper school social drama. I don't
Okay,
love
we
it,
have
but I feel very
And then another suggestion here in the chat is to keep listening. In other words,
Yeah.
listen and not say. I love that.
Or even like
Okay.
sometimes I'll say, what do you think you should do? Or what are you planning to do? And kind of turn it back to them and help them to like get that problem solving thinking going. Because right now they're just awfulizing about how terrible it is. And so sometimes I'll jump in and say, well, what do you think you're going to do?
Oh,
Be
Deb,
yourself.
Be
great
yourself.
question.
Yes, Patty. Yes.
Be
And
yourself.
Deb said something too. She said, "What if they ask?" So Deb, I think that's a great question. We actually have a part about that in 2 slides. So good anticipation. But one of the things I would say is that you can give feedback if they ask for feedback. So sometimes what you might say is, well, would you like me to tell you maybe what I think? You could say that.
Yeah.
So again, you've now given them the opportunity you've empowered them to say yes.
Then it's not
Tell me what you think.
unsolicited, right? Then
it's not unsolicited.
I mean, I think it's always good to say, what do you think first? You know, what do you
Exactly.
think? And then like Courtney says, if they're asking for your advice, I was more referring to the unsolicited advice that we like to give as parents.
Okay. So here is sort of what we think would be the stress less approach to this scenario. And this can apply to more than just this scenario.
Right. As I said, yes, beware of giving unsolicited advice. You know, don't be blown about by every wind. As you all know, I'm sure as parents, your kids are on like an emotional roller coaster. It's hard to keep up with them sometimes. And they really need to feel our calmness. If we escalate, they will escalate. So us staying calm, of course, validating. These are very difficult things to go through. We all remember going through this. It is painful and it is hard when friendships change. That's very painful. And then the final thing, you know, we call it interviewing for pain. So like when our kids are going through something difficult, it's really tempting when they get in the car. If they say they've had a fight with some kids or something, you know, and they get in the car and we say like, what did so and so do today? Or did anybody say anything mean today? We call that kind of interviewing for pain versus asking, you know, what went well today? Or who did you play with at recess today? To try to help them to shift to the more positive parts.
And one thing I want to add to this too that we didn't put on here is that sometimes it will seem like it's a crisis. So like it's really hard sometimes because your kid seems like they're in an immediate crisis because it feels like a crisis to them. And so in that moment, especially, it's so hard to try to just kind of like validate and not do that. So in that moment, if your kid is in crisis or it feels like a crisis to them, really try to like tell them to do some breathing and slow down their breathing to try to get them to be in a calm space. And then I would, in that moment, I would say, you know, I think we need to take a little bit of space and time. You could sit with them. You could just give them a little time so that they can not react emotionally and try to get back into that rational thinking, just to buy a little bit of time and space. And even, but you also for yourself, because sometimes I think you're going to want to react emotionally as well. So that's just something to pay attention to for both them and yourself when they're acting in crisis.
That's good.
All right. Our next scenario is in the realm of sports.
All right. So here we go. Want me to read this one?
Yeah.
Yes, go for it. And it's
this is not about me.
She thought maybe we were writing it about her because she's a coach, but it's not her.
Yeah. But hey, I've been there. Sometimes this happens as a coach. Sometimes this is how some of my players have felt, and it kills me, but it's a reality of what it is. And so I get that. Okay. So your child has been playing on the varsity team for 2 years. This year, she has a new coach. While her last coach used to give all the kids pretty equal playing time, this year, your daughter seems to be sitting the bench quite a bit. You encourage her to talk to the coach, but she says, there's no point in talking to him because he hates me. Your child absolutely loves her sport, and it is something that normally brings her so much joy. Now she seems to dread the practices and the games.
Oof. Tough one.
I have to say, this is pretty common. And, you know, all Derryfield kids play sports, right? Like that's a requirement. We really believe in the team aspect and learning to get along with others on a team and learning a new skill, learning how to play something. So I think this is, I don't know, I think this is really common. So I was hoping that let's do the same thing again where we use the
Back to the
chat.
questions.
Back to the
What is this bringing up?
question.
What is this bringing up for you guys as parents?
And
So
it might
yeah,
not be a sport. It could just be a club that they're part of, or it could be if they're in theater. I mean, obviously, it's not like they're not riding the bench in those situations, but I
true.
think we can relate this to other club activities as well.
Totally. Anything where you have to try out for something or share the limelight, or boy, your child feels like that maybe they're getting passed over or ignored or wondering why they're not getting playing time. And this is like very common. So anyone want to write in the chat feelings that this would bring up for you? We kind of do the same type of idea. Feelings this brings up for you as a parent, reading this scenario or going through this scenario. Let's give you guys a couple. Sad, yeah.
I would say maybe frustrated, but
I was thinking protective. Sometimes I think parents in this scenario are very protective of how their kid is feeling, especially when there's a big shift and maybe what they were used to.
Yeah. Yeah, I've definitely been through this as a parent. I can definitely, all three of my kids are very athletic. I didn't really so much get that from me. So, yeah. And someone else is saying a little upset, wondering why it changed. Yeah, good, really good point. Like you could have had a star, on a certain team with a certain coach, or with the makeup of the team could be different. And then your child moves up, or your child moves to with a different coach, or some dynamic changes. And, this has been something that my kids and I have dealt with. One of my three was really competitive. And that one, I remember bawling, bawling. We were literally at a banquet where they won the state championship for basketball, and she got cut from um, a softball team because she didn't play through the summer like she was suggesting, all those things. But she had gone from being like a captain the previous year. And I think she just was like shocked. I mean, that's like a totally different, not totally different scenario, but I think she had gone to Derryfield in middle school and then gone to like a, bigger division high school. And she was like, what just happened? Like I had getting her identity from, I think as parents, we can see our kids forming some identity around what they're good at, what they like, what they get into, their friends too, their friends like that they meet on the team. And then same child, like in basketball, she was, captain at Derryfield. And again, she went through a shift where she was like on the bench a lot more, having to be sharing some roles, changing her role completely, which she wasn't used to, what she had played all her life as a point guard, now being completely different. So, and I remember this specific scenario, like, let's, hey, I'm encouraging you, talk to your coach and ask, what would you suggest that I work? Is this something that I'm doing? Or is this something that you're seeing as a coach and that's completely different than what I'm seeing? Maybe the coach sees you as a center and you never saw yourself as a center. So, but boy, it's really common as from a kid's perspective to say they don't like me, or it's so
oh
hard for the
yeah,
kid to want to
yeah,
talk to that coach, because the fear, I think the fear from the child's perspective is what they don't must not like me as much as so and
yeah.
so and
My
so.
experience is that anytime, not anytime, but oftentimes when a child is either struggling in a class or not getting, the assumption very commonly is the coach doesn't like me, the teacher doesn't like me.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that's kind of why we threw that in there, because I think a lot of kids in this situation feel like he must not like me, he doesn't play me, so
Right.
So I think that's really common. So yeah, what do people think about kind of what you could do that maybe wouldn't be um, communicating confidence to your kid, or how you might react, or what's a tempting way to react?
Yeah. What's a good suggestion for a child that's in this
Work as
situation?
hard as you
Just
can and be respectful and prove you can play. Yeah, from Rand. Yeah,
nice.
because Rand
Well,
is a coach. Rand cares.
Miranda is a coach.
Time
Yes.
soccer coach, so
Soccer, right? Yeah. That's
he
awesome.
certainly has experience in those conversations with
Work
parents.
harder.
Work
Earn
harder.
your spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Very
will say
similar responses.
from a coach sometimes, and this is a hard thing as a coach, is that if you have a kid, let's say they're the 10th best kid on the team, right? So they're starting at the 10th best kid, and every kid is working hard, you would hope, right? They
Yeah.
might still always be the 10th best kid, which is a really hard thing. So I think sometimes we also have to be careful, because who knows, if they might think I work hard, so now I'm going to play more. And
Yeah.
I always try to communicate with my kids, well, it's an expectation of everybody that you work hard. So it has to happen. I think there's no secrets to why kids get better. Sometimes it's because in sports it has to happen outside of just the practice, right? And some other advice that I would say is exactly that's what I was going to say too. Thank you. And that was my next point, is that at the end of the day, even if you didn't get the result you wanted, let's say you didn't get more playing time, wouldn't you rather have pushed yourself as hard as you can? Because that's something you're learning through that experience. You might not always get the result you're looking for, but you have to be able to be sort of leave everything out there, because I always tell my athletes you can control two things: effort and attitude. And at the end of the day, you don't want to go back and say, well, I didn't try hard enough, or I didn't work hard enough, or I didn't have a good attitude about it. So you have to, and you might have another way you can contribute. I can tell you right now, I've got players who are on my bench and they have the best energy ever. And at the end of the day, sometimes they're the ones who I put in the game, and sometimes I do, even if they're not that great, because they're cheering and they're yelling and they're encouraging their kids. So there's lots of different things that coaches are going to look for
And
too.
so some
I
kids
agree.
are never going to play, right, Courtney? I mean, some kids,
Yeah.
it's just not in the cards for them. But still, like you said, what role can they have on the team, and can they still encourage their teammates and work hard?
And the biggest thing with that, Mary, is that for me, and we talk to our kids about this, but I wouldn't say all coaches do this, but we talk to our kids about being transparent. Because if a kid, I try to be transparent with them if they're in that scenario, but they also, let's say it wasn't me and it was someone else, I would encourage the kid to be transparent, because if they're feeling all this emotion and they're telling you as a parent, I think that the child needs to share that to kind of get it out there, because otherwise they're just going to build up all this resentment, and it's just going to come out in ways that we don't want them to express it.
You mean like share
I
with the coach, Courtney? You mean like share?
Yeah, not with their teammates. I'd say share it with their coach, and just have an open and honest conversation. Like, I'm working really hard. I'm really having a hard time. I feel like maybe you don't like me. Like I would actually have them share that, so that they can hear maybe from their coach what the coach actually thinks or feels, right?
So
It's
do you
actually
want
good for the coach too. I mean, I've been a coach too,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it's actually good for the coach. I mean, when players have said things to me, I've been like, whoa, that's how they feel. Wow. That's good for me to know,
Sure.
as like, I am not trying to communicate that. So, like, that's good for me to know. I need to know how to make this team work differently, or value this person, make sure that they know, that's a valuable player. I do have to say one more thing about this too, is I remember for like all the years, again, like my kids were playing sports. I think something that really meant a lot is when they get the sportsmanship award. Remember those awards? Sportsmanship.
Mhm.
Like that's probably like the best thing. And I used to remember, I told all three of my kids got one of those. And I said, you know what? That's like the thing that I'm the most proud of, is because that gets so much more to like being a team player, and being your best self. I love that, but it's also about being noticed as being kind to like other teammates, giving them a hand when they're struggling on the team. When someone else is down on the other team, like offering their hand to like help them up. And so that's like I'm proud of those type of awards. So anyway, and that's I love what Patty said, which is why do we do sports? It's not just about winning. It's not just about being the best. It's like all the life skills that you learn, which is why I love Derryfield, that everyone plays a sport. I love that. I've always loved that about Derryfield. So anyway, we have
And
one more, I think.
Yeah, Courtney, go ahead. Do you want to talk just quick through these summary points? Coach Cheatham.
Sure. So here's a stress less approach to responding to this scenario. So if your child is struggling or uncomfortable, especially in the sports scenario, we kind of I think it's good to respond with like, hey, great. Like this is a chance for you to get more comfortable with being uncomfortable. And it's a perfect opportunity to do that. And a chance to help build their confidence to kind of work through this uncertainty and this novelty, because it does sound like in this scenario it was a shift. So it's an opportunity for growth and helping them understand and see how there's places for them to grow and how to kind of get back on track. And then the other thing with this one is to sort of empathize again, but help them see things from a different perspective. Because remember, in this scenario, you're hearing it and seeing it from just your child's perspective and their assumption of the coach's perspective. But you kind of have to say, well, is that really like what you think your coach feels? And maybe they do. And it's okay, well, evidence do you have to support that? What are the facts? And I think the question, what are the facts, is always a really good one. So the facts are you're not playing. Okay, so how is you not playing it suggests that your coach doesn't like you? Like, do you think your coach wants to win the game, or do you think your coach wants to play people that he thinks are nice, right? So it's sort of just talking through those kinds of things and trying to help them talk through in their perspective and understand it from a different perspective as well, and maybe help them understand. So it doesn't sound like maybe you think that your coach doesn't like you, or maybe that is what they're underlying fearing, but really trying to identify what they might actually be feeling. Maybe what that means is they just don't feel good enough, or maybe they're losing confidence. So that's just some things to think about with that one. Awesome. Our last one here. Oh, go ahead, Mary. Sorry.
No, I was just saying great. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Now we have an academic one. Oof.
Yeah, so the academics, I think, is really important because we are a prep school, and I think as parents, we can get really anxious about grades, especially because, college admissions being what it is a stressful situation. We want our kids to be successful. We want them to be able to reach the goals that they want to reach. So it's hard to not get anxious about how our kids are doing academically. So we thought it was important to just throw in an academic scenario. So your incredibly bright and hardworking child is struggling in an advanced level history class this year. He has never received a grade below 90, and now he is struggling to keep in the 80s range. You have looked over his papers for him, and they always seem to be done very well to you. He is feeling frustrated and defeated and worried about how this grade will affect his transcript for colleges. So real quick in the chat, I'm kind of keeping an eye on the time too. So real quick in the chat, what does this bring up for us as parents? And maybe even with the second question is, what does it make us feel like we want to do, or what might we do that might not be the best thing in this scenario?
So the student went from A's to sounds like struggling.
Class, there's one class that he's struggling with.
Yeah. But it sounds like he's never received a grade below a 90. So this is a big shift.
If we're going back to Courtney's advice on the last scenario, I know it's hard, but I think he's never experienced this before. Great. Frankly, this is great. Better to learn how to get up from falling down now rather than at college for the first time. Yes, I was going to say along the lines of what this parent is saying. As Courtney was saying, sometimes if we can let our first reaction be great, he's being challenged finally, or he's really feeling like the rubber's meeting the road here. So that's a good thing. Have a child connect with the teacher. Definitely. I think that's a great idea.
And somebody else said, you know what, B's are not the end. I think it's a good thing.
Yep. Oh yeah, I
Very
did that,
nice.
taking ownership.
Good perspective.
Learning is more important than grades from Rand. Yes, we agree. Learn to advocate and build
Yes.
resiliency. Because I am totally a parent. No, but Lainey was a DS graduate, so she's had this experience too, right?
And
Yes,
you're now
she
you're a
has.
cat parent, Lainey. So I mean, let's not.
Lainey's a cat parent, and she's also Lainey Shaughnessy, who's our new school nurse, and also a Derryfield graduate, and a breakthrough graduate.
Yes.
You're a parent now, Lainey, to all the Derryfield students. So
Basically, she's been running all of our COVID tests to make sure everyone's well. I mean, that's amazing. So this is great. Talk to the teacher, have the teacher and try to understand what is the expectation, and learn to advocate, build resiliency. And so, yeah, I mean, I think one thing I think, I won't say who, obviously, but there was a kid that I was talking to recently, a student, and this student was really worried, I have to tell you, about their parents' reaction to their grades. And the student was saying, I don't want to disappoint my parents.
oh yeah, they always do
Um,
that. Yes.
and
Even
they're really
people
that,
who don't ever put pressure on them, they always say that. Yes. It's a
yes.
really common feeling that kids have. So yeah, so for don't let your anxiety become their anxiety. Like I know, how could that happen? How could our anxiety? So if when our child gets in the car, the first 10 things we say to them are like, how did the Spanish quiz go? Did you talk to your math teacher? Did you hand in that assignment for history? And, that's one way that our anxiety could kind of become their anxiety.
Hmm.
Show them through your words and actions that you have confidence in them. I think that's kind of what we've been talking about.
The actions is crucial. The actions is crucial. So like we can't just say that we're going to act this way, but then we're checking MSA every 5 seconds and
right, like saying
emailing
that
the
you have confidence
teachers
in them, right? But then checking MSA. Yes, good point, Courtney. Encourage them to use their resources, of course. What does Anna say?
She's saying that she says this to Blake every day
Oh,
after
Anna,
school.
how do
That's
you think I
awesome.
know? Because this is, I mean, we all do this. Here's the thing, and I'm a worrier, so I really do relate to this deeply. Raina and Courtney know I can be a little bit of
Yes.
a worrier. So like I'm in my head worrying about all this stuff, and I'm always having to keep that in check because yes, if you're worrying about whatever it is you're worrying about, it's very tempting as soon as your kid gets in the car. That's like what you want to know because you're trying to reassure yourself. So you're like,
Yes.
please, like, help me reassure my own worry.
But actually, to stop you there, isn't this also like what you guys are reminding me is to keep yourself in check, like to
Yeah,
be more self-aware that this is a button pusher for you. You started out with that,
yeah. So
Mary, by
this is,
saying,
Courtney and I kind of made these key points.
summarized.
And so
yes,
exactly, I think the first and most important thing as a parent is to know what your content is, as Lynn Lyons would say. If you guys don't know Lynn
what's your
Lyons,
button pusher? What's your
what's going to trigger you? And again,
yeah,
for some people, they're really into sports and that's like the path they want their kids on, and maybe you coach or whatever. And so for other people, it's other things. But knowing what your anxiety is triggered by is really important. And in those moments, giving yourself some time to think about how am I going to react?
It goes back to we respond emotionally when we respond immediately, and so we have to stop,
nice.
give space, and give time. You can quote me on that. I just made that up.
I really like that, Courtney.
Thanks.
On the spot. Wow.
On the spot.
That's
Good thing we
impressive.
recorded this.
Yes,
right? But
it's
I think that's true.
Yeah.
And for me, like, I think for me as a parent, just being aware that sometimes the things we do send this message that we're not confident in our kids, and we don't mean to send that message, but there's this unintended message when we're constantly giving unsolicited advice or we're constantly checking on this or that. There is an underlying message like, you can't handle this, buddy. I'm going to handle this. And I think we need to realize that that could have the effect of our kids not building as much confidence as they might
And
otherwise.
so, and while we're stopping ourselves, right, to give us some time and some space before we respond, I think we need to think about Mary's point here, which is we have to say, what message do I want to send? What is the message I want to send? Because very often we start talking and trying to handle it, and we think we're sending that message, but are we really? I don't know. So you want to think about, what is my actual message? And then once you can figure out the answer to that, then you actually figure out what the message is.
Good advice, Courtney.
And you can't really come up with the message while you're so in your head and you're worried and you're spinning. You're worried and you're stressed and you're going, oh, I'm like so stressed that what should I do? What do I want to convey? And I think we're going back to the beginning of the chat, where Rita said empathy. Like, empathy is great. Never can go wrong with empathy. Like, wow, you're having a hard day. I hear that. And then saying very little. Is that Rita again? She said the same thing. I think saying little, listen more. And I think I love what you just said about holding back. And you guys were saying hold back a little bit and just notice, like, okay, I feel like I'm really stressed out about this. I probably should say very little. Give myself time to calm down, right? Like, we don't send emails to other adults while we're angry for a reason. You end up saying something you regret and then projecting all of that like onto our kids.
So the last two parts here are just, we want to make sure, we try to keep normalizing things, because most often what your child is experiencing is in the spectrum of normal. And so, it could be a little more worrisome or a little less worrisome, but normally it's just within a spectrum. And that, these challenges are going to be inevitable. So we have to kind of empower them to get through these challenges. And just remember that as parents, you're not alone. We're not alone. So find other parents to connect with. Raina mentioned that before. And I put, this is just the work set, but I put our contact information here. So I'll leave this up on the screen. And we're going to take a couple of questions, I think, if anyone has any questions. So we can keep these in the chat, because I think the chat has been a good way.
Q&A or chat if you guys have any questions.
Yeah, it doesn't
and just
have
remember,
to be...
no one, I was just going to say, just remember, no one has all the answers. No one knows. This is just, everyone's trying to figure out, and every different thing is different. And so anything we can do to try to help and support you, please reach out to us.
Absolutely.
And we will do that.
Absolutely.
I'm just going to stop my screen share.
I was going to say, if you guys have any questions, doesn't have to be related to the presentation. If you just have any questions at all about
Derryfield's, counseling or anything. Yeah. Counseling department.
I will say that Lindley and I think Lindley Schutz and Mark Blaisdell are going to be giving a presentation in a few weeks about, thank you, Jill, about academics, more like the academic side of things. So
2 weeks from today, right?
Yeah, 2 weeks from today. So that will be an interesting.
That's going to be a good one.
Yeah.
And those are two amazing people to give that talk. So
if
you're thinking about
everybody, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I want everybody to remember too, that like you might be feeling like even worse now because you're like, oh my God, I've been doing all of these things that they're telling me I shouldn't do. And just remember, it's not your job to be perfect, and it's not your job to be doing everything correct, but it is your job to reflect and think. And let's just like allow ourselves also a little bit of time and space to kind of
loving kindness.
Yeah, loving
to
kindness.
ourselves.
Cut ourselves a break.
Cut yourself a break.
Absolutely.
And now that you're all going to leave here and start thinking, let's leave here when we start thinking of questions. You can just shoot them our way.
Courtney, we have a couple of quick questions. So
we do? Okay.
Jennifer's asking, as we come out of COVID, how are we going to help the kids and parents adjust to being social/normal again? That's a great question.
Something that I see at school for the students, this is a lot. I mean, this is a lot what we're going through, and it isn't normal for kids to be apart 6 feet. They want to like lean in to talk to one another, and they're more mindful now of like protecting each other. So they know it's the right thing to do to separate, or they know that they have to be in a cohort. For example, in the middle school, they have like tight cohorts, right, to keep them safe and not mix. And it's not, and I like the question, Jennifer, because how are we going to help them? It's almost like they can't wait, to be honest with you. It's like every time we give them an opportunity, like even sitting in the A&W for lunch, like the younger kids especially, I think they're like, can't wait to see their friend and sit with their friend.
I mean, I do think we will have to, especially for our new students, but for all our students, I do think we'll be doing a lot of really intentional team building work once COVID
Mhm.
is over, because some of our newer kids haven't really had the chance to get to know their classmates as well as, normally we're doing all kinds of social stuff. That's just kind of what we do at Derryfield. So we will
Yeah,
definitely be adding in additional social opportunities, I think, as COVID gets lifted and things get back to normal. And
absolutely.
I do think for some kids who, oh, good, I can answer that, Carolyn. For some kids who maybe struggle more with social interactions, that could be that they might need a little bit of help
It's a
adjusting back to
practice, isn't
normal.
it? Like social skills is a practice.
Right.
So we're going to have to be aware that some kids are starting in different places, and some kids have been affected by not being able to, right, practice these things. So we're going to have to be sensitive to that, I think, as a school, as a culture, that, and, lots of screen time. I think I see a question here about screen time on the Q&A. Kids going to school all day, and some kids are on the screen a lot if they're at home, and then they go from the screen to the homework. And what the parent is experiencing is stress because of lack of balance. And so we've been having conversations, just so you guys know, to put it on, as I'm one of the head class advisors, I'm the ninth grade head class advisor, and what we've been doing is trying to coordinate, okay, who's giving what when, so that we can spread it apart, and that we can give in class time to work on things and the best we can. And I'm speaking for the ninth grade, of course, but I know that every grade's having these conversations. So please email me, if to that parent, if you want to say more. And that's helpful for us to know, so we can pass that back to Jed Silverstein, the head of the upper school, or Mark, and saying, some kids are particularly stressed in this grade right now, and then we bring it right back to the head class advisors. So that information's helpful.
Yeah. So Carolyn is asking about, yeah, so she's kind of asking about, do we wait for kids to come to us? Do we have a way of reaching out? It's been a little different this year, I have to be honest, because I'm kind of adjusting. Courtney's been doing this all year on campus, but normally, I connect with kids in all kinds of ways outside of my office. So I try to like get around and get to know kids in natural ways. So yeah, kids can come to us and they do sometimes reach out. Sometimes though, it's a parent that reaches out and says, "Hey, can you check in with my child? This or that is going on." Sometimes it's a teacher or an advisor that might say,
Advisor,
"Hey, like,
often
can you check
advisor.
in about this?" Or actually, a lot of times Courtney and I have, kids come in about a friend. They're worried about their friend, or they're not sure if their friend is okay. And so it happens in all different ways. And we try to, my goal, honestly, is to try to get to know kids naturally in a way that's like a non-threatening. That's why I've always had like a fridge and couches and things in my room. And Courtney's actually upgraded my office quite a bit since she moved in. But we try to make it a really comfortable place where kids can just come and hang out, so that it isn't strange if they need to talk to us. They feel like they already have a rapport with us. That's kind of the goal. But yes, they reach us in all different ways.
I
Go
would
ahead.
say too, Mary, just two more points I want to make about that. One is that I will say with new students, especially on campus new students this year, I've tried very hard, especially younger kids, sixth graders in particular, but also new seventh and eighth and some ninth. I've tried to actually outreach them and just say like, hey, and I have a dog that I bring. So like everyone wants to meet my dog. One of my dogs is great. The other two I could never bring. Anyway, So I have the dog, and I just reach out to the kid, and I'm like, hey, like I've been meeting with new kids. Like, can I check in
Right,
with
so
you
it
and like
seems
introduce
natural.
myself?
It's like a natural thing, right?
But I also like just like try to outreach, all of them if I can. So that's kind of fun. The second thing I would say too is that what we're talking about is very reactionary, but I do think that the school, and they're creating some new stuff for next year also, and some different positions and stuff that are going to help with this. But I think one of the goals that all of us as parents and as a school need to work on is sort of a proactive approach, because we know that the reality now is that more kids have been exposed to trauma, more kids are anxious and depressed and whatnot. So what we want to kind of do is we want to have education that sort of permeates more kids, and so that people can kind of get help beforehand and recognize some things and just work on ways to de-stress. And we're trying to incorporate some more mindfulness and things like that in our daily practice at school, so that as a result, we are kind of just creating a less stressful environment, because academics in general tend to increase stress, especially at a school like Derryfield, where there is an academic rigor. So finding the right balance and figuring out how we can incorporate that proactively is super important. So I just wanted to make that last point before. I think we're kind of heading our time here. So just a reminder that you can reach out to us. We're here for you.
Absolutely, yeah.
We can help talk through any of these things, and we can learn together, right?
Absolutely.
We definitely can. Thank you all
Thank
for
you everyone for coming out,
coming.
and hopefully we'll do something again soon. Let us know what you want to hear.
Thanks
more
for the
about.
interaction too. We really
I know
appreciate
next time I want to do a Zoom where we can see and hear you, but we'll
We
arrange
thought
that.
we were doing that. That's another story.
I
But
know.
anyways, it's all right. It's all right.
It's okay. It was great to see
everyone.
everybody, quote unquote, see everybody.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye. Have a good night, everyone.